The trail camera had been mounted to a white spruce at the edge of my property since August of 2022, pointed at the frozen creek bed where deer came to drink. I checked it every 2 weeks, pulled the memory card, scrolled through dozens of frames in the dark of my kitchen, and deleted almost everything. That morning in November of 2023, I almost deleted it again without finishing. The timestamp read 2:47 a.m. The temperature sensor logged minus 19 degrees Celsius. And moving through the frame in a single file line, barely visible against the snow, were 5 gray wolves. But it was not the wolves that made me stop. In the center of the group, matching their pace, moving with the same low and deliberate stride, was a small, dark shape that made no biological sense at all. I leaned closer to the screen. My hands were still holding the coffee mug. I set it down without looking away. If you have never lost a dog, I'm not sure I can explain what the next few seconds felt like. If you have, you already know. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe to Lost and Wild if you have not yet, and tell us in the comments what city you are watching from. We love knowing where you are. Now let me take you back to where this actually started. Rufo came into my life in the spring of 2019, about 4 months after my wife and I moved from Duluth to a piece of land outside of Cook in St. Louis County, northern Minnesota. He was not a planned addition. My wife brought him home on a Tuesday in April, wrapped in her jacket, barely larger than her 2 fists pressed together. He weighed 1.4 kilograms at his first veterinary visit. The veterinarian described him as an adult male Chihuahua, approximately 3 years old, with no microchip and no history anyone could trace. She said he appeared healthy, which surprised her given the condition he was in when my wife found him in the parking lot of a gas station off Highway 53. He had been there for 2 days, according to the clerk inside. No one had claimed him. No one had called. He was not an easy dog to understand at first. He did not behave like a small dog is supposed to behave. He did not seek warmth or laps or the reassurance of human proximity. He spent his first week inside the house, investigating every corner with a focused and almost methodical attention, as if he was mapping the structure before deciding whether to commit to it. He slept near the door, not on the bed. He ate precisely what was offered and left nothing behind. He was 3 kilograms of observation and patience packed into a form so small that our neighbor, a retired forester named Gerald, laughed the first time he saw him and said he looked like something you could mail. What Gerald did not see, because Gerald only came by in daylight, was what Rufo did at night. From the very first week, he walked the perimeter of the property after dark. Not running, not playing. Walking with his nose low and his ears turned outward, quartering the ground the way a hunting dog does. I followed him once with a flashlight just to see. He covered the full border of our 2 acres in a wide loop, paused at each corner, and returned to the door. He did it again the following night, and the night after that. Whatever he was doing out there, he was serious about it. By the summer of 2021, Rufo had been with us for 2 years. He knew the land the way a person knows a house they have lived in for decades. He knew where the snowshoe hares ran along the east fence line. He knew which mornings the ravens came in from the north, and he would sit outside before we were awake, watching the tree line, long before any sound reached us. My wife said he was just a dog doing dog things. I had lived with him long enough to disagree, though I could not have explained precisely what I disagreed with. In July of that year, the Voyageurs Wolf Project, a research program based at the University of Minnesota, published updated data showing that wolf density in the greater Voyageurs ecosystem had held steady at roughly 65 wolves per 1,000 square kilometers. Our property sat approximately 40 kilometers south of the national park boundary. Wolves had been documented moving through the corridor regularly. We knew they were out there. We had found tracks in the mud along the creek in the spring of 2021, a full set of prints from an animal that had walked the same line Rufo walked at night. My wife took a photograph and sent it to Gerald. Gerald said the stride length suggested a large male, probably part of the Bug Creek pack, which ranged widely across that part of St. Louis County. We did not change anything because of the tracks. Rufo went out at night the same as always. We had no reason to think that was a problem. On the morning of October 14, 2021, I woke before the alarm and understood immediately that something was different. The specific quality of the silence in the house was not right. Rufo slept near the back door every night, not on a bed, not on a cushion. On the bare floor beside the door, with his nose pointed at the gap at the bottom, where the cold air came in. I went downstairs. The floor beside the door was empty. The door was closed and locked, as I had left it the night before. I checked every room. I checked the basement. I went outside in my coat and called his name into the dark at 5:45 in the morning, standing in the frost at the edge of our property where the trees began, listening to my own voice come back to me. He was gone. We searched for 11 days. We drove the roads in a grid pattern, walking the ditches on foot. We put notices at the Cook Post Office, the gas station on 53, the veterinary clinic in Virginia, Minnesota, 40 minutes south. Gerald walked the creek corridor with us twice. We checked every trap camera image I had from that period, which showed deer, a black bear moving through once in mid-October, 3 foxes on separate occasions, and nothing else. No sign of Rufo. No body, which I told myself meant something, though I was not sure what. By December of 2021, my wife said what we had both been thinking. She said it quietly one evening while we were eating dinner, and she said it carefully, the way you say something you have rehearsed so the words come out without breaking. She said that a dog, his size, in that terrain, in that season, probably did not last long. The winters in northern Minnesota do not negotiate. The temperature had dropped below -25 by the second week of November. Whatever had happened to him, she said, it was over. I did not fully believe her. I did not fully disbelieve her either. I left the trail camera running. The months that followed were ordinary in the way that months are when you are waiting for something you cannot name. Winter gave way to a late spring. Summer came and went. A second winter arrived in November of 2022, and I mounted a second camera on the opposite side of the property, pointed at the western edge where the land drops toward the creek. I pulled the memory cards every 2 weeks. I looked at everything. I deleted almost everything. In September of 2023, the Voyager's Wolf Project released footage from a trail camera that had captured a wolf pack moving through the area near the park boundary. The footage was shared widely online, and I watched it several times, not because of the wolves, but because of how they moved. Single file, unhurried, coordinated in a way that looked almost deliberate, as if they were following a route they had agreed on before they started. I remember thinking that whatever intelligence governed that kind of movement was something most people never got close enough to observe. 6 weeks later, on the morning of November 9, 2023, I pulled the memory card from the spruce tree camera and brought it inside. I made coffee. I sat at the kitchen table and began scrolling through the frames the way I always did, looking for deer. The timestamp read 2:47 a.m. The temperature sensor logged -19. 5 wolves moved through the frame in a line from right to left, their bodies blurring slightly at the edges in the long exposure. The lead animal was large. The second and third matched its stride exactly, and between the third and fourth wolves, moving with its head lowered and its small body angled slightly forward in the same posture as the animals around it, was a dog. A very small dog. I sat at that table for a long time without moving. The coffee went cold. Outside, the sun was coming up through the birches along the driveway. I looked at the frame 14 times before I understood that I was not misreading it. The animal in the photograph was between 20 and 25 centimeters at the shoulder, based on the scale of the spruce trunk visible in the background. Its ears were large and upright. Its body was compact, narrow at the chest, with the proportionally oversized head that is characteristic of the breed. It was dark in color, possibly black or very dark brown, which I could not fully confirm in the monochrome infrared image. It was moving through the snow at a sustained trot, without apparent difficulty. covering ground on legs the length of a finger, surrounded on both sides by animals that weighed, at a conservative estimate, 40 times as much. There was no sign of distress in its posture, none at all. I called Gerald first because Gerald spent 30 years in this forest and would tell me if I was wrong. He came over within the hour, stood at my kitchen table, put on his reading glasses, and looked at the frame for a while without saying anything. Then he looked at me. Then he looked at the frame again. He said that in 3 decades of working in that ecosystem, he had never seen anything remotely like it. He said he needed to make some calls. Over the following 2 weeks, Gerald contacted a researcher affiliated with the Voyageurs Wolf Project, who agreed to examine the image. The researcher noted that the image was consistent with a small domestic canid, moving within close proximity of a wolf pack, without apparent stress responses from either species. He said he could not explain the mechanism by which it had happened. He said that wolves are highly territorial with other canines. That integration of a domestic dog into a wild pack was considered essentially incompatible with established behavioral literature, and that he had never personally documented it. He also said, and I want to be precise about this because it matters, that absence of documentation is not the same thing as impossibility. What the researcher could say with confidence was this: Rufo, if it was Rufo, had been surviving in the field since October of 2021. 2 full winters, 2 summers. He had been living in terrain that kills prepared and equipped adult humans if they make the wrong decision at the wrong moment. He had navigated the same corridor where we had found wolf tracks in the mud in spring of 2021. And somehow, in a sequence of events that no trail camera recorded and no researcher observed, something had shifted in the dynamic between this animal and the pack that shared his range. We tried to recover him. I want to be clear about that. Over the following 3 months, with the researcher's guidance, we established a feeding station at the edge of the property and a live trap designed for a dog his size. Gerald built a small shelter near the tree line to reduce wind exposure around the trap entrance. We checked the camera daily. The wolves returned twice more in December and once in January of 2024. In the December footage, the pack moved through in a group of 6, and Rufo was among them, identifiable by his size and ear shape and the specific way he turned his head to look directly into the camera lens as he passed, which no wolf in the frame did. He did not enter the trap. In February, we placed clothing with familiar scent near the trap entrance. In March, we consulted a canine behaviorist in Minneapolis who said that what we were attempting was genuinely unprecedented and offered no guarantee of outcome. She said that a dog who had survived 29 months in those conditions had almost certainly undergone behavioral reorganization that we could not reverse through conventional recall methods. She used the word feral, then paused and said that feral was not quite right either. She said she did not have exact language for what we were describing. The trap was never triggered. I have thought about that a great deal in the time since. Rufo weighed 1.4 kilograms when he arrived. He was a dog who had been abandoned in a gas station parking lot off a state highway, who had spent 2 days on cold concrete before my wife wrapped him in her jacket and brought him home. He spent 2 years learning our land with the patience and method of something that had never had the luxury of being careless. And then, on a night in October when the temperature was dropping toward winter, he walked out of our life and into something that our categories of understanding do not comfortably hold. I do not know what he found out there. I do not know what the pack accepted him as, or what he offered them in return for the tolerance that kept him alive through 2 northern winters, when the snow on our land ran past the fence posts and the creek froze solid from bank to bank. The researcher said that wolf pack cohesion is maintained through a complex system of behavioral signals accumulated over time, and that an animal capable of reading and producing those signals correctly might, under rare circumstances, achieve a form of proximity that fell outside the standard predator-prey framework. He said it again slowly when I asked him to, because I needed to hear it twice. The last recorded image we have is from March 18, 2024. The pack moved through at 3:12 in the morning, heading northeast, toward the park boundary and the deeper forest beyond it. Rufo was at the rear of the group, slightly behind the last wolf, moving at the same pace. He did not look at the camera this time. He was watching the tree line ahead of him, tracking something in the dark that the camera could not see. The feeding station sat untouched through April and into May. I checked the camera every week until June. After that, I stopped checking every week. I still check it. I have not seen them again. My wife said something last winter that I keep returning to. She said that maybe the question was never whether Rufo would come back. Maybe the question was whether he was ever truly lost in the first place. She said this on a Tuesday evening while we were eating dinner, and she said it the same careful way she says things she has thought about for a long time. I did not answer her right away. I looked out the window at the dark edge of the property where the birches ended and the forest began. In February of 2025, the temperature dropped to -28 for 11 days in a row. On the 9th night, I woke at 3 in the morning and went to the window without knowing exactly why. The yard was blue-white under a full moon. The snow was deep and unbroken all the way to the tree line. Nothing moved. I stood at the window for a while longer than I needed to, looking at the place where the forest began. And then I went back to bed. I have not told many people this story. The ones I have told tend to go quiet before they respond. The same way Gerald did at my kitchen table, looking at the image with his reading glasses on. The silence is a specific kind. It is not disbelief. It is something closer to recalibration. The moment when the size of the world quietly expands by an amount you cannot measure. Rufo was 1.4 kilograms of patience and method, and a directional attention that I spent 4 years trying to understand and never quite managed to. He walked the perimeter of this property in the dark for 2 years, nose down, ears out, measuring something I could not perceive. Whatever he was preparing for, it seems he was ready when it arrived. This story is one of hundreds that never made the headlines. If you think more people should hear it, share this video with someone who needs to. Subscribe to Lost and Wild and tell us in the comments. Did you predict what was going to happen? We will see you in the next one. Every animal has a story. Some take years to be told. This was one of them.